So there's four things that I think we need to do. One is act now and innovate for the long term. The second one is come at an issue from all angles. So you've heard me talk about that with public policy, with partnerships, et cetera. The third one is integrate these things into your business. So whether it's onboard products or integrating it into the customer relationship, as we talked about in the Microsoft or Microsoft in 12 example. And then the fourth one that I've been thinking a lot more about recently, and we talked about it a little bit in the case of Phil Before You Fly, is ensure that as many people as possible are aware of these new technologies, to build, to normalize them, to make them what we need for the future, and to sort of normalize that demand and that groundswell of support for a long time.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Diana Burkett Rakow. Diana is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Sustainability at Alaska Airlines. She has led some fantastic initiatives, from a partnership with Choose, which allows SAF to be bought in exchange for miles, to introducing bottled water, which created as much marketing buzz as sustainability impact. Diana also has led leading partnerships with the likes of 12 and Microsoft in rethinking how airlines and aviation as a whole can become sustainable. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Diana Burkett Rakow. Diana, welcome to the show. Alaska Airlines does not only fly to Alaska, does it?
Great way to start, Shashank. Thanks for having me here. This is a fantastic setting in the middle of London. The sun is out.
Finally.
I know, it is truly spring, and people are running and biking along the canal. This is a great place to be.
Absolutely. Always be on the water.
So you're right. We were born in the state of Alaska over 90 years ago. And that ethos of connecting communities and supporting one another, I think, is very much still alive and well in the company and really informs who we are today. But our headquarters has been in Seattle since the 50s, and we fly throughout the Americas, cross-country, up and down the West Coast, Canada, out to the Pacific, to Hawaii, and down into Latin America. So it's a great network and a great team of people.
I know about the team of people because I've known people at Alaska Airlines since 2007. And even then, they had stayed there at the company for 30 years, 25 years. And I love airlines where people love to stay for a long time because, it speaks volumes. Talking about long time and long-term goals, you're one of the two airlines in the US and one of the fewest in the world to have set a 2040 target for getting to net zero. Why did you do that?
It's a great question. So let me give you a little bit of context. So as I said, Alaska Airlines grew up in the state of Alaska. We now serve some of the most hard to serve air service dependent communities in our country, as well as some of the biggest urban areas. But I think that history and that evolution of growth has informed sort of our focus on long-term value and our focus on taking care of each other. And we actually have a business model that we talk about delivering value for the four stakeholders that we are responsible to: our guests, our employees, our communities, and our owners. And they're usually represented in a circle because none of them are on top of one of the others. They all have to be in balance, which frankly is sort of the definition of sustainability in a way, right? So that ethos informs a long-term history with sustainability. And we've actually been reporting on our environmental impact since 2009. And we had a set of goals that sunset in 2020. And so when we were looking at those goals and how to restart them for the next phase, we looked at a series of 2025 goals and we established goals across three areas: carbon emissions, waste, and ecosystems, including water. And the reason that we chose those are they're the three main impacts, major environmental impact areas for us. And then we also set goals in other, social impact areas, people, et cetera. But in the discussion with our board about those goals, we thought, okay, those are incredibly important and they force action now, but we needed to set something longer term, given our long-term orientation, and make sure that it was bold and ambitious, which is how we got to the goal of net zero by 2040. We talked about a net zero goal by 2050, and 2050 just seemed so far away. You could wait. And we said, no, we need to hold ourselves even higher, more highly accountable, which is why we set that 2040 goal. And then there's another thing in our culture. We don't set a goal without having a plan. And so we said, okay, if we're going to set that goal, before we actually land on it, before we're able to say that that's what we're doing, we need to know not exactly every single step, but roughly how we can get there. So that was the origin of our 5-part path to net zero. So we still manage our work according to these 5 parts of the path to the ultimate goal of net zero. The first is operational efficiency. That's the foundation. The second one, and we also have a goal that's more near term, but of being the most fuel efficient U.S. carrier. The second goal, or the second part of the path, is fleet renewal, fleet modernization. And we're bringing the 737 MAX into our fleet, which is significantly more fuel efficient than the airplanes they replace. The third, of course, is sustainable aviation fuel. The fourth is new technology, including new propulsion technology. And then the fifth is carbon credits, only as needed to close the gap to net zero, because we know that there's a lot of uncertainty in sort of the time that it will take to mature and make more SAF and new propulsion technologies available. And we put some clear criteria around those carbon credits so that they would be high quality and verified. And we haven't, needed to get there yet, but that is the fifth part of the path.
So that's, I'm guessing, just to bridge the gap, whatever is left.
Exactly. And, the way that path is structured requires taking action now, but also investing in and making sure that we're supporting, enabling those longer term technologies. So it enables us to have the kind of pragmatic side of action now, and then the innovation side of let's create the future that we need.
Fair enough. Can you help me differentiate the first two pathways that you had, which is operational efficiencies and a modern
renewal.
fleet renewal?
Yes.
I would think a new fleet would lead to operational efficiencies.
Yeah, it's a great question. So they both do lead to operational efficiencies, or they both lead to improved fuel efficiency. But the operational efficiency piece is more about how we actually use the airplanes and how we run our business and our behaviors. So it's things like plugging in ground power and ground air so that you can turn off the auxiliary power unit. And we know that the auxiliary power unit burns a half a gallon of gas every minute. So that's significant. That adds up. They're tiny increments, but they are big in aggregate. Single engine taxi, for example. We use AI software called Flyways to optimize flight routes. So all of those sorts of things, the weight on the aircraft, the engine wash programs, all of those are the pieces that add up to that operational efficiency piece. And we actually put a fuel efficiency or carbon intensity goal into our all-employee bonus program. It's worth 10% of every employee's bonus each year is hitting that carbon intensity goal as a way to underscore that commitment to operational efficiency.
Every employee?
Every employee. So we have a goals-based bonus program where every employee across the company, different percentages of your compensation are at risk depending on role, but everyone shares the same goals. And one of them is around environmental sustainability.
But can employees themselves do much about environmental sustainability?
They can. Pilots can do single engine taxi. Flight attendants can help remind guests to lower the window shades, for example, on a hot day so that the airplane stays more naturally cool and the preconditioned air has a chance to work. The airport team can make sure the preconditioned air is plugged in effectively and on time. Every part of the ecosystem works together. The maintenance technicians, a couple of years ago brought a new engine wash program forward as another step in that process. And then on the commercial side, everyone on the commercial side has a role in making sure that every aircraft is optimally utilized, because the more that we actually maximize load factor by airplane, the more we're using every asset wisely. So the whole, every part of the system works together.
It seems from what you're saying, everything you're doing for sustainability is closely linked already to fuel efficiency and companies' profitability. From route optimization and load factors impacts profitability to using single engine taxi and burns less fuel. Are there things outside of lowering fuel burn and things that may impact profitability on the wrong direction, which also are part of the program?
Well, I don't like to think about it as impacting profitability in the wrong direction, but prefer to think about it as sort of investments in the future. So there's the foundation of that path. That first step is operational efficiency, and then there's the fleet renewal, which is a significant investment in aircraft technology. Then the next steps beyond that within the 5-part path are sustainable aviation fuel, which we're currently using and doing a lot of work to mature that market and invest in future technologies. We're acting now while not using the technology because it's not yet certified, but acting now to support new propulsion technologies for the future. And then we haven't yet purchased carbon credits as a company, but we've been doing some work with Carbon Direct to actually understand the market and try to inform the market toward our criteria. And then on the other areas, we can get into waste management, onboard recycling, investing in trading out products on board to provide more, and we have a goal around that, to supply more recyclable or more sustainable, otherwise more sustainable solutions for onboard service and other products, and then investing in healthy ecosystems and balancing water. So we try to look at the whole, and then we focus on what can we do today and what do we need to enable for the future.
I think we're going to hit all of these one by one in this interview. So let's start with sustainable aviation fuel. How do you balance between buying SAF today versus buying an offtake in the future?
It's a good point. So we need all of it. So we do purchase SAF today. There's not enough of it available. And so we work with a couple of different suppliers to purchase what we can. And we also use that SAF to engage other stakeholders, to engage corporate customers in helping support the market long term, and to a certain extent to engage consumers. And that part's going to grow. So we use it in our operation today. But then we also know that we need to both provide a demand signal that allows for financing and support of more supply coming online, as well as financing support, other ways of encouraging new technologies to come online. And so the way that we think about it is actually building sort of a portfolio strategy of different technologies and different suppliers that can provide short, medium, and long-term supply, because this market has a long way to go and we need it to go a long way.
We often debate about the mandates in the EU versus the incentives through the IRA in the US. Now, in the US, you're not required to uplift SAF today. Why would you do it? Why would the CFO even agree, hey, let me pay 3x my fuel bill to buy this when no one's requiring me to do it? Why do you do it today?
Well, a couple things. One of them is, unless we start somewhere now, we're not going to get where we want to go longer term. So we have to do that in a smart way, but there actually isn't, enough supply to go around. So we have to use some of the supply now and then continue to work on development of new supply for the future. The other thing is that our customers are starting to ask for it. And we're fortunate that we have customers that are not only starting to ask for it, but willing to collaborate on enabling it. So Microsoft, for example, is a good example of a partner that we have in Seattle. And we're fortunate to have a lot of great ones there in Seattle. But Microsoft came to us a couple of years ago. We started to talk back in, it was probably 2019, about how do we work together to make aviation more sustainable for the long term. And so we created the first partnership where we would uplift SAF and we would work with Microsoft to transfer the Scope 3 credits so that they could reduce the impact of their business travel. And we would co-invest in that SAF. That program obviously has grown. We have other partners, other airlines are doing very similar things. And it's a real opportunity for us to enable that SAF now and enable that SAF long term. Microsoft has also partnered with us in a couple of other areas to look at longer term technologies, and that offers some exciting potential.
Now, the party to this Microsoft deal, I believe, was 12.
That's a new deal. The original one, it wasn't. But SAF. We are now working on SAF with Microsoft and 12.
That's okay. So let's talk about that. This is very interesting because it seems that there's always a green premium for SAF. Microsoft is paying for the green premium for buying SAF for Alaska Airlines from 12 in the future because they're not operational yet. How does this work? And tell us about why 12 and what are you doing with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know you had Nicholas on your podcast
Absolutely.
recently. He's a fantastic partner and really visionary in how he's growing the company. So we met 12 several years ago. I went and visited them in their Berkeley offices as they were getting started and really appreciated their vision for making fuel from recaptured CO2, renewable energy, and water. And it sounds simple. It's not. But it's a really interesting technology and I think really exciting for the long term. As they were looking to grow their company, they decided to actually build a facility in Washington State. And that was enabled by some of the policies that were put in place in Washington State.
I had Senator Billick.
You did. He's been a phenomenal leader. And I think, again, very visionary in thinking about not only the sustainability potential to grow new green technologies in Washington, but also the job impact to create, facilities and new businesses in other parts of the state. 12 chose a facility, a location out in the eastern part of our state. They're powered by hydropower, and they broke ground last year. And they're, building up their capacity, but that synthetic fuel will get used in our airplanes when it comes online. And then we are able to use the Scope 1 credits from that SAF, and Microsoft is able to use the Scope 3 credits. And it wouldn't be possible without that tripartite agreement and real alignment, I think, about the fact that we need these technologies to grow for the long term.
It's so interesting to see how three sort of almost disparate parties are coming together. I would say four, including the government. Who's I think deeply involved from Washington State to bring this to I think Moses Lake.
Yeah, our original step with Microsoft and 12 was not the purchase agreement. Our original step was actually an agreement for the three of us to work together on policy, on infrastructure, on learning about the technology. And I think, there is a lot of emphasis on the actual purchase, and we need that ultimately. But there's also a lot of benefit we've found from saying, okay, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but we know that we come at it from different parts of the value chain. We all share the same goal. We need to come at these issues from all angles. So let's work together on a defined set of priorities that can enable those next steps.
Do you think this method of working, and I've seen you do this with Microsoft and 12, I've seen American Airlines do this with Citibank. There are a few airlines individually doing this, and then there are alliances. So there's SABA, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Buyers, which is a bunch of Scope 3
Yeah, we were
buyers.
one of the founding members of the Aviators Group, the airline piece.
So what works better, or do you want to do both?
I want to do all of it. No, I think we don't know exactly what is going to unlock that future. And I also think it's not going to be one thing. There isn't one key to creating that future durable, commercially viable, widely supplied market for SAF. So I think taking every opportunity we have to try new models is the way to go. So we've got individual partnerships. We've got that tripartite partnership. We work with other corporate partners. You referenced the 2040 goal. We're part of the Climate Pledge because that's
the Amazon Climate Pledge.
That's a community of people, not just on sustainable fuels or even on decarbonization, but on all fronts that we can work together with. We're part of the One World Alliance, and that group has been phenomenal. And internationally, the Airlines Association and the U.S. Airline Association are all incredibly collaborative, working on public policy advocacy and then cross-industry. You mentioned SABA. we were one of the founding members of the aviators group of SABA, and we joined with this idea that the more that we could sort of pool knowledge, demand, and action, the better we could create a positive flywheel for the SAF market. And we were really excited to be part of the announcement that was made just a week or so ago. So was 12 and several others, which is the largest collective procurement of SAF. And we're excited to build on that.
This is great progress, and you're sending very good signals. I remember having Scott Kirby on the podcast, and he was very bullish about the future of SAF, and he shared how United has bought a lot of offtakes in the future. But I then had a climate activist also on the podcast who was very critical of this approach, which was just offtakes. And this person, Hiske Arts, she highlighted that look at the actual amount of SAF that's flown on an airline like United. Yes, they have a lot of commitments in the future, but we don't know how many of these will come true. But look at, let's say, Air France KLM, which I think bought 16% of the global SAF supply in 2023, even though it was only 0.6% of their total fuel bill. What do you say to critics like that? Like, oh, airlines are just focusing on the future and not doing too much right now.
I say we are doing some things right now, and there are some things we can't do yet, but we're doing things now to enable further action in the future. And that balance of sort of pragmatism about what we can do today and innovation and vision for doing things now that enable that future is probably the right balance. So using SAF today, we're using what we can, and we need to make sure that we're creating an environment where institutional investors will come in and invest in SAF plants, where public policy and even just broad public will to support this new technology. It makes me so happy when the term SAF rolls off a non-aviation person's tongue. I met somebody last night that doesn't work in aviation, and she said, "Do you work on SAF?" And I just thought, oh, and she's even using the acronym. The more that can be a normalized technology, the way that solar and wind are, we take for granted that solar and wind are just normal things out there. You see them all over the countryside in England. You see them all over, the United States. It's part of the renewable energy future.
I saw that in Iowa, of all
exactly.
places.
Yeah, it's part of the renewable energy future, and so is SAF, and we need to create that future.
I have to give credit to Virgin Atlantic and the first SAF flight they did, and Richard Branson, because I think that did more for SAF PR than anything else that came before it. Because on Christmas over dinner in New York, I had a conversation with my family members in which none of them, being in aviation, were talking about, hey, so planes can fly on cooking oils? Yes, let's talk. You're right. The conversation is happening. Now, in your stakeholders, you mentioned customers and employees as the first two. How do you get them on board? How do you educate them? And what are the tools you're giving them to buy in to Alaska Airlines' sustainable future?
Well, for employees, our employees are really phenomenal in terms of how they serve our guests and how they are motivated to run an excellent operation. And this is just one aspect of running an excellent operation. And having the performance-based bonus goal be part of that ecosystem is a way to start a conversation. We put it in a couple of years ago. I think we're still working on doing a better and better job of making sure that the education is clear, because sometimes it's a really hard concept to explain. But every time we get feedback, we try to learn from it and improve that message. And that also then translates into how we talk to consumers. We started a campaign a couple of years ago called Fill Before You Fly with one of our fellow Climate Pledge signatories, Mir. They make reusable water bottles, and they have a great sustainable manufacturing model for their company. And we made some bottles together. But the biggest thing was the platform with hashtag Fill Before You Fly to start getting out into the ecosystem this idea that you could actually bring your own water bottle to the airport, fill it inside the airport grounds after security, and then skip the cup on board. And it's a simple thing. We can't measure the direct waste impact, but a lot of people started to post and to be proud and be part of this community, bringing their own water bottle and filling before they flew. So just a little thing like that, it doesn't solve the problem, but it creates more waves of awareness and action.
So, since we're on water, the last time I flew Alaska out of Seattle, I saw a huge screen outside my boarding gate, which said that Alaska and boxed water save 2.2 million pounds of plastic from landfill each year by having boxed water. Being an external observer, I felt that boxed water on board a plane was a huge PR coup for you. You, of course, have a PR background yourself, and you handle both PR as well as the sustainability bit. How much of boxed water was led by consumer perception versus the actual impact on sustainability?
That's a great question. It was led by the impact on sustainability. We have this goal of replacing 5 significantly waste-producing items on board by 2025, and the switch from plastic water bottles to boxed water was the first of those. It was a really significant step. We were thrilled to work with a partner that had a great brand and that thought about the consumer engagement angle. And then there was the hook that they have in their business of, post about a boxed water and they'll plant a tree. And we've got a great partnership with our food and beverage team who ultimately put that partnership together. And it was a great step. And then the other thing we were really excited to do was the next step, which was to move to a plastic-free water service and actually swap out plastic cups with FSC certified recyclable paper cups. The challenge in this space, and we're continuing to look at other items to replace, the challenge in this space is working with the supply chain to find an alternative that is viable, that works in an aviation environment where safety is paramount, and there's practical considerations of the supply chain and delivery and making sure that supply is there. Water is so critically important to have. Wherever you land, you need to be able to resupply with water and have enough supply for the flight. So working with the supply chain to make sure that those things could be true for these new alternatives was really important. And I think we'll be doing more of that.
Let me ask a nuanced question here, which is, I think, unique to the US. Does Alaska Airline own its terminals, airport terminals?
In the state of Alaska, sometimes we own our terminals, but not in the lower 48 states.
Okay. And why I'm asking this is because a previous guest from an airport on this podcast, I will not name him, was very clear to me that the biggest pushback they had about removing single-use plastic from the airport was from duty-free, because they sell a lot of plastic bottles.
Oh, that's fascinating.
For people. And it's one of the highest profit margin products sold at an airport, which is just bottled water. And people want to carry it on. So you've done 2 things to kill that business, which is, one, to tell people that you can have a refillable bottle, and second, just have box water and take on plastic completely. So I'm just wondering if you ever had any pushback from airport retailers or duty-free or anything at all.
No.
I'm glad. I'm glad you didn't. The other thing from a consumer perspective you've done is trying to sell SAF as well as carbon offsetting on your website to passengers through a partnership with Choose. Are you able to talk about that?
Yes, it's a exciting partnership. So let me take a step back for a sec. We've talked about a couple of these things, but thinking sort of big picture about how do you actually drive change, I think is the foundation of really all of your questions. How do you drive change, and how do you not do a few things today that doesn't turn into a bigger change long term? So there's 4 things that I think we need to do. One is act now and innovate for the long term. The second one is come at an issue from all angles. So you've heard me talk about that with public policy, with partnerships, et cetera. The third one is integrate these things into your business. So whether it's onboard products or integrating it into the customer relationship, as we talked about in the Microsoft or Microsoft in 12 example. And then the fourth one that I've been thinking a lot more about recently, and we talked about it a little bit in the case of Phil Before You Fly, is ensure that as many people as possible are aware of these new technologies, to build, to normalize them, to make them what we need for the future, and to sort of normalize that demand and that groundswell of support for a long time. really thinking about all of those elements, one of the big things that we are doing is engaging our guests, our individual consumers. So the first step of that was having an option available, a strong, credible option with a good user experience for guests who wanted to offset their emissions to do so with credible nature-based offsets or through SAF. And we partnered with Choose as the technology platform. They're a phenomenal company and have worked with a number of other carriers, including a lot of one world carriers, to make that option available. So guests can find that through a website or a pre-trip email or other communications. The second step we took last year was sort of a pilot program between about late November and the end of the year. A lot of people are thinking about, oh boy, I'm not going to hit that next elite tier. Is there a way for me to buy up? Is there a way for me to take a mileage run? How else could I get to that level? And so what we wanted to do was offer a sustainability linked alternative to the year-end mileage run. So we launched a promotion where if you purchased SAF credits, carbon credits from SAF, we would provide guests that are members of our mileage plan elite qualifying miles. So miles to get to that goal. So for every $100 of SAF credits, 500 elite qualifying miles up to a cap of 5,000. And we were able to work together with our guests for a really phenomenal result. We had higher uptake than we expected. And so now we're going to build on that and actually put that SAF credit options in the booking flow so that it is part of the guest experience for every one of our guests that purchases a ticket on alaskaair.com. They may or may not take the option, but it's an opportunity for them to learn a little bit more and, again, normalize this idea that sustainable aviation fuel is part of our future. And for those that are mileage plan members, again, we're going to continue the tie from purchasing SAF credits to elite qualifying miles. So we're really excited to launch that.
This is fantastic. What's the take-up rate on this? You said it exceeded your expectations. Did you sell a lot of SAF through this? What was the take-up rate?
We did. I can't share a specific take-up rate, but we actually, our guests supported 500,000 gallons of SAF just in that short time period. It was more than we had budgeted for or expected. We were certainly able to supply it, but it was more than we expected, which was really exciting. And
I'm curious if anyone tracked the decrease in mileage runs for the last 2 months of the year. That would have been very cool.
It would be. It's hard to measure because you don't know who's going on a mileage run and who's going on a trip that they, would otherwise have taken.
I wish I could have polled my friends in the Pacific Northwest who typically would do those runs and say, if I'm not going to do it because I already, jumped my status thanks to this promo.
One of the things we need to work on is making sure that those options are as widely known and as widely understood as they can be. And that, part of this next step of putting it in the booking path has actually been trying to make sure that we've got information out there that's really good for consumers to understand what is SAF.
Yeah.
You referenced the cooking oil feedstock previously. I think one of the things that's confusing about SAF is that it's not sort of apples to apples to apples. It's a whole fruit basket of different technologies and feedstocks. And I think that can be a little bit overwhelming to understand for the average consumer. So trying to simplify it, boil it down and make it as well understood as possible is another part of the journey. We just launched a series of videos with one of our chief pilots talking about our sustainability journey, but also unpacking SAF a little bit with some graphics, and we'll continue that education effort.
Fantastic. Let's move on from SAF. I know we've spent a lot of time on SAF.
Come on, I could talk about it all day.
We need to do an encore episode for that, only about SAF. Let's talk about future aircraft because you mentioned it's one of the pathways, future technologies, and you do have a partnership with ZeroAvia, which is not too far from here up in the Cotswold. How does that fit into Alaska Airlines plans?
ZeroAvia is a fantastic company. We got to know them several years ago, and one of the things that I was really impressed by, so they're a hydrogen electric powertrain manufacturer. And one of the things that I was really impressed by was sort of the combination of their pragmatism about the technology development and their sort of innovation and vision. They have a vision of aircraft being powered by hydrogen fuel cells backed behind a battery. And that's a really exciting vision. But they're taking it step by step to prove the technology with increasingly larger aircraft and doing that alongside the certification process. So they were the first to fly a small aircraft with this technology. They've now moved up. They're working on a caravan. And part of our partnership with them is that we transferred to their ownership one of our retired Q400 de Havilland Dash 8 aircraft, which is a propeller plane that we used to fly in our regional network. And they are working in Everett, Washington, just north of Seattle, on the technology that will be able to retrofit those engines and power that aircraft. And we're really excited about that technology as part of the regional, particularly starting with sort of the first regional aviation ecosystem in the future.
It's very interesting. When do you expect that these planes will be flying for Alaska?
I don't know yet. I mean, a lot of it depends on the certification technology. I think it's possible that they are certified by some of them by the end of the decade. We don't think that it will be a huge part of our footprint change before 2040, but we do have the potential for it to account for some of our footprint, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to what comes out of it. And we've, of course, not only had Val Miftakov on this podcast, but they're also in my book.
Yes, they
and
are.
It was really fun visiting their hangar and their operations up in the Cotswold.
Yeah, I had a chance to go up there a couple months ago, and it does make a difference to see things in person and be able to support the evolution.
It's the real deal, right? I think it fits into this overarching trend I've noticed around industrial tourism, where countries like Portugal, for example, if you go to Portugal, you can actually go visit a pencil making factory.
Wow.
Or a shipyard in Genoa in Italy. And if you look at it from an aviation perspective, not many people have been inside an airline hangar. But what if you could go to ZeroAvia's future hydrogen aircraft hangar? And I think it's an opportunity right now that a few of us lucky ones have.
That's exciting. You should, just as an aside, we have something every year called Aviation Day. It was sort of started in Seattle, but now it's also in a couple of other cities where we've got hubs. And for one day, we open our hangar and we invite kids from all over the region, from different schools and aviation programs and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and a lot of other things, to come to the hangar and check out, the aircraft, to slide down the emergency slide, to talk to the mechanics.
So cool.
The flight training programs come and talk to kids about what it's like to have, a future in aviation. And then usually in Seattle, a big, military aircraft will fly in from Joint Base Lewis McChord. The port, fire, and the Coast Guard will come. And so you've just got this ecosystem of aviation right there. And it's sort of to your point that it's a really cool field, and it's tangible and it's real, and it's really exciting. So we're glad to open our doors when we can.
Well, not only inspiring future pilots in these kids, I think you're also powering the future because of the Airline Venture Lab you've launched with Up Labs. Now, we've had JetBlue Ventures on the podcast. We know what IAG is doing with Hangar 51. How's this different from Alaska Airlines?
Sure. So there's actually two steps there. So the first one is back in 2021, when we built that 5-part path to net zero, we created Alaska Star Ventures, which is our venture investment arm. And the purpose of it when it was founded was to identify and enable those technologies that can accelerate the path to net zero, recognizing that many of them don't exist at the scope or scale today. But even in operational efficiency, there's AI programs and other things that can just help us run the operation better. So that was the first step. And we worked with several really fascinating partners to identify technologies and to invest directly. Recently, we started a new arm of that, or a new phase of that, with Up Labs, which is the idea that we will work together to actually create and develop some of the companies that will develop these will develop the technologies and the companies that can help us solve some of the most complex problems that we're facing. So for that piece, it might be in sustainability, it might not be in sustainability, or it might not be in sustainability, but it has co-benefits for running an efficient operation. So we're excited about that. We're working on a couple of to be announced concepts.
Okay, and have you done any major investments that are public right now? Are there any areas you're focusing on for these?
So back to Alaska Star Ventures on its own, ZeroAvia is a good example. That was an investment through Alaska Star Ventures. And then for Up Labs, we haven't announced any of the new companies yet.
Okay, I'm going to watch this space.
Watch this space.
Definitely. Um, Finally, your focus, of course, is on the west coast of the USA, all the way from San Diego to Anchorage, Alaska, and further up north. How important are the state and federal incentives from California and Oregon and Washington State and others in making this a reality?
They're incredibly important. Back to this idea of coming at the problem from all angles, public policy and government incentives are a really critical element to kickstart, to provide, sort of close the activation energy gap. If you think about a chemical reaction, you have to close that gap in order to get to the result, and government incentives are a big part of that. Permitting reform is another piece to make sure that actually companies can be attracted to and actually build facilities in a community, which have the benefit of creating jobs there. So all of those things working together are critical, and we're privileged to work in several states where that's been a priority. The United States as a whole has some great incentives, as you alluded to. I think the real focus there is making sure that they're implemented well, and have the result that they intend, and then also that we can extend those, because the short time frame reduces the certainty, which can de-risk that private capital investment that is so critical for that long-term success of the market. And you raised the earlier, I just wanted to come back to sort of the difference between the mandate orientation in Europe and the UK, although I would say both are also, particularly in the UK, doing some things on the incentive front as well, and the US. And I think it's an interesting natural experiment to see how the different models will advance the market. But we really desperately need all of those solutions and a really strong role by government to kickstart the market.
Yeah. An interesting side effect of the incentives versus mandate I see is companies like ZeroAvia, which have a base in California and in the UK. Or you've got others as well, which are doing research on both sides of the pond. And that becomes very interesting, taking care of incentives there as well as the mandates here to fulfill those mandates.
It is. It's really exciting. And it's one of the reasons I'm here and able to do the podcast with you in person, is learning from some of the technologies that are maybe being developed here, but are interested in basing themselves in the US or even on the West Coast of the US, which is critical for us. And vice versa. I think we've seen some that start in the US and come over to the UK or Europe. So it is a global problem, and it's a global market, which is good.
It's one sky. We all have one sky, right? There is another issue I would love for you to address, which is around growth versus sustainability. There's always this argument, yes, airlines are reducing per seat mile emissions, but overall emissions are growing. And the pushback I get often from airline CEOs is that we have to have a economically sustainable business to even think about environmental sustainability. Case in point being
That's right.
Alaska and Seattle as a hub. You have in the last decade or so managed to maintain your position in Seattle as your hub city despite the onslaught from competitors, because you have managed to grow significantly out of Seattle. That growth is not going to stop overnight. In fact, it's growing further because of the new Hawaiian acquisition, which hopefully will get approved soon by the government. If that goes ahead, you will actually have wide bodies within your fleet, which will be a first for Alaska. How do you look at, the integration with Hawaiian from a sustainability lens, as well as the overarching question of growth versus sustainability?
Okay, there's a lot in there. You're good at asking very complex questions.
We will unpack it one by one.
No, I like it. So a couple things. One, just kind of going back to where I started, actually, we serve a lot of communities that are really dependent on air travel. So for example, in the state of Alaska, we serve 19 communities, only 3 of which are accessible by road. So that means sea or you have air. And people use air travel to visit friends and family, but also to go to the doctor, to do school sports, really sort of to do business, the end-to-end parts of life. And I appreciated your interview with Marie Owens-Thompson. As an economist, she speaks very compellingly of the economic opportunity that is afforded by access to air travel. So it's true big picture. It's true, on the ground in communities in Alaska. And in communities in Hawaii, which have the same situation. They're just separated by ocean instead of land. So and the other place I started is that relentless commitment to our stakeholders. And we do have to have them all in balance. But we know that we have to have a business model that supports us to be able to continue that really critical air service and to continue supporting the families that we do through our employees and to grow those great jobs. So that says, okay, we need to grow responsibly, and we need to use that growth to power a more sustainable future for aviation. Hawaiian also has a great sustainability ethos. They themselves are grounded in a community where that is critical. And we've worked together on some SAF initiatives and some other things. And we're really excited to combine our companies, pending regulatory approval, and be able to work together. We're both significantly smaller than other carriers in the U.S. industry, highly competitive against those carriers, as you pointed out. And we're excited to be able to work together to compete.
I do wish you all the best on that one.
Thank you.
It's pretty exciting. Final question, Diana. You yourself have had a very interesting journey. You've done a bachelor's in chemistry from Harvard. You worked in healthcare for many years. In Alaska Airlines, you have led everything from PR to sustainability. And you've had a pretty busy year with the Hawaiian announcement, the MAX incident, and now, of course, all things sustainability. How did you end up here? What's been the secret to this journey? Have you just kept saying yes to interesting things, or, from a chemistry background to now, talking about composition of SAF back to square one? But, you're looking at PR as well. You're probably fending off a lot of journalists on what to do with the MAX issues and how Alaska is coping. And, you've spent more than 5 years working in healthcare. How does this all come together?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey indeed. And that will, I hope, continue. When I think about the things that are common threads through those experiences, I really enjoy complex, concrete problems, which I think is what got me into science in the first place, and learning to unpack those problems. I also really enjoy bringing people together on teams to look at a problem from all sides and to solve it. And in addition to the sort of complex problem, I feel a very strong sense of purpose to make the world better. And I believe that is the best way to do that is through coming at a problem from all sides, through leveraging what business has to offer, and solving that problem of making sure that all of those stakeholders are on balance. So it's really sort of science and society are the threads that come through. And, I've had the privilege to work for companies that I really admire. I was a very proud MVP Gold and champion for Alaska for many years before I started working at the company. And right now, one of the things that really motivates me is the challenge of climate change and how do we protect and preserve the privilege that we have to live on this planet and to have the beautiful outdoor spaces that we have and to, sustain climate against some material change that has and is occurring. And it's both a critical human problem and a fascinating science problem. I am really motivated to come up with business and partnership and other solutions to solve it.
I love the journey you're on, and I wish you all the best in achieving all the goals, including the 2040 goal, which is much sooner than most other airlines have set for themselves. The final part of this interview is called the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. So I'll start with a simple question, like your favorite airport.
Oh, my favorite airport. I didn't expect that one.
This is the only time I get to throw you off.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I'm just about to head out to Heathrow.
No.
I'm going to give you a funny, what I love about it is you get your steps in. I'll come up with a better answer next time.
Have you tried Toronto?
No, I haven't been through Toronto.
You'll get double the steps in. Then you get into Heathrow. Okay, favorite airline that's not Alaska?
Oh, that's not Alaska. Oh, that really threw me off too. I've loved flying Japan Airlines, the few chances
Yes.
that I've had. I love it that you sort of get to step into the culture as soon as you step on the airplane.
Brilliant. Very good answer. Who do you look up to?
Gosh, a number of different people. I think a couple of examples. One, two women leaders, Madeleine Albright and Jane Goodall, who were sort of incredibly strong, perhaps before their time or right in line with their time, but they had the courage to drive really powerful ideas and create successful outcomes. And so I really admire that. I also really look up to my kids, which is maybe a funny answer, but
How old are they?
they're 7 and 10, and they think big thoughts, and they're really brave, and they're really funny, and so I learn a lot from them.
I love it. Well, of course, you've met your kids, but have you met Jane Goodall or Madeleine Albright?
No, I haven't.
Okay, it would be really interesting if you could actually.
It would.
Jane Goodall, make her your sustainability ambassador.
Yeah.
For Alaska. No monkeys or chimpanzees there, but we'll figure something out. What is your favorite book?
A number of books have really stuck with me, but The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri was one that really resonated with me and still does. Just the complexity of human lives and stories and how we all relate to one another.
Good choice. Favorite movie?
Probably have to say Love Actually, though. That's maybe
Oh,
a little
wow.
cliche.
A Christmas favorite.
I know. I love it.
Okay.
And I love it that it starts and ends in those airport scenes.
Yes.
Yes. And it's true that there's
Love Actually
a
is
lot
everywhere.
of collected humanity in airports, and it's interesting.
Yeah. Flew 2 days ago, and I was coming out of Heathrow, and at arrivals I saw a family rush to the person in front of me. And they were all in tears, hugging her and jumping and cheering, and there was a bouquet of flowers, and I was like, wow, flying is magical. Indeed, flying is magical. What do you do in your free time?
Well, I don't have a ton of it, but I do. I try to get outside as often as I can, running or walking or hiking with my family or going skiing in the winter. I just think, fresh air and being in nature always brings a different perspective.
You like walking, that's why you like Heathrow.
Yeah, exactly.
What is something you'd like to learn?
I have actually been thinking a lot about, you referenced my undergrad degree in chemistry. I've been thinking I actually want to go out back and pull out a chemistry textbook. So I suppose I learned it at one point, but I have been learning more as I've been getting into different SAF technologies, and kind of want to go back and relearn some of that stuff.
I gave up on technology, on chemistry way before you did, and I too want to relearn it now, given how much there is to learn.
There are so
in
many
sustainability.
fascinating technologies being developed right now. I mean, I want to learn about all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. If we meet 1 year from today, and we are popping champagne, what are we celebrating?
I hope we are celebrating a material change in private capital being invested in the SAF market.
Okay, good point. Maybe we'll come up with a number on that. If we hit that, we'll actually go pop champagne. And final question. If you're on a super long haul flight, well, London to Seattle is long enough, who would you like as your seatmate if you had a choice?
Well, I talked about a couple of really remarkable women leaders a couple of minutes ago. So, I don't know, one maybe different answer is my grandmother, who passed away. My daughter's named after her, but she passed away when she was 104.
Wow.
And the amount of change she had seen in the world was pretty phenomenal. And she always had good perspective when I was, stressed out about sort of how much people were angry at each other in politics or something, just about the ups and downs of cycles and how much people do figure out together. And I think we need some of that hopefulness that comes from perspective sometimes.
I think the aviation industry right now is a good example of different silos working together towards this common sustainability goal, and it gives a lot of hope.
It does, yeah.
At least to me and,
Me too.
and many others. Diana, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I know we've had to wait a while to have you on the show. We made it work. Thank you so much for showing up in your full self, and I do wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm glad we got a chance to do this in person. Worth the
Indeed.
wait.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simplifying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simplifying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simplifying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our supervising editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.